We jump into today's discussion, which is very brief, in chapter 9. We're talking about rewarding giving, how giving is a matter of being rewarded. It is something that rewards everybody. We're going to see today. It's just unbelievable what giving can do. Verse 1 begins the subject of faithful giving. Paul's really trying to prop their gift here by exhorting them and also making promises. He's a super salesman. And right now he's exhorting them. They have to be faithful. He's going to say in verses 1 and 2, you folks began well. In verses 3 through 5, we will help you finish. Very clever. I wouldn't be that clever. If I were handling verses 1 and 2, you guys need to complete what you started. I'd then say, complete it and send me a text to let me know it's been done. Paul was too smart for that. He knew human nature. No, you need to finish it, and guess what? We're going to send 3 men to stand side by side with you, step by step, and help you do it. So that's kind of like saying, you need to give. I know you're going to give. Let's walk back to your safe right now, and I'll watch you do the combination so you can get that money out so we can take it out. He doesn't fool around with them because he knows they've stalled for 1 year, and by the devil's work, they'll stall another year. He can't afford that. So now with verse 1, now concerning the ministering to the saints, referring to the Jerusalem saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you, which is something we all do. I really don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. Why? Because I really have to do it. So I know it's superfluous. It's a nice way of saying, you don't need for me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I know your willingness, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal has stirred up the majority. Paul is a master diplomat in the best sense of the word. He doesn't come in there as their daddy, dragging them to the woodshed and saying, you bums, you promised a year ago to get this offering together, and you've done nothing. I am sick of you. I am embarrassed about you. I think you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. That's the temptation we would have. And as we discipline in the flesh, that's how it comes out, isn't it? But in love, in the gospel, we take a more diplomatic approach. It's not a deceiving approach, but it's more loving. So verse 1, I know it's not necessary that I write to you. That softens it. Number 2, verse 2, I know your willingness, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians, your brothers and sisters to the north, that Achaia, that's the region of Corinth in the south of Greece, was ready a year ago, and your zeal has stirred up the majority. Notice what he says of a positive nature about people who are not following through on their promise. He still tries to win them over. And he says in verse 2, you're willing. He says, I'm boasting about you and your willingness. He says, you were ready a year ago, and that zeal has stirred up others. He's taking a positive approach instead of a negative. The negative approach would be not your willingness, but you are apparently unwilling. Not I boast, but my boasting is empty because you're not following through. The idea that you were ready a year ago, but you've done nothing. And your zeal stirred up the majority, but hasn't stirred you up. You see the difference? You see how that approach just distances them. And this is important for us as we are disciplining others or overseeing them. Come in there with guns a-blazing and just separate. And is it not words that separate us? Doesn't that lead to rifts and to separations and divorces? And we can come in and speak our minds, we say, and be candid. I must be true. No, I'm just being in the flesh, and I'm being angry, and I'm being petty as I tear you down. So he doesn't do that. There's a problem. You make a promise a year ago and don't follow through. Others are impressed by your promise. They follow through, and you're still sitting there in neutral after a year. That needs to be addressed. But he addresses it in love. He does it optimistically. He points out their good points, and he lovingly encourages them to get going. That's responsible leadership and, in a sense, responsible discipline. So he's very masterful at that. Now, verse 3, he knows about their willingness. He knows about their zeal. But he's saying to himself, I don't trust you guys as far as I can throw you. If I leave you alone, we're going to get nowhere. He doesn't say that, obviously, but he's again optimistic. We all need help. I'm going to send you 3 brethren who are going to help you finish what you need to finish and what you promised to finish. And he says in verse 3, I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this respect, that as I said, you may be ready. So he is honest. I'm sending these fellows to you because I don't want to boast about your willingness and have it be empty because you never followed through. I want you to be ready, and they're going to help you be ready. There are times when you can say to somebody, you promised to do something, you didn't do it, get it done and report back. But there are other times you might have to say, you didn't get it done, I'm going to help you do it. Recently I had 2 situations in the church where we had to deal with disciplinary situations. And one involved excommunication and the other one involved the person voluntarily leaving, but it came down to the same ideas and the same principles. And in both cases, when I communicated with these individuals, I was very clear to outline the sins, the faults, what had been done wrong. And then I added what needed to be done right. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I said, I stand willing and ready at any time to help you step by step in this process of restitution, reconciliation, repentance. In the past, to be honest with you, I would have pointed out what was wrong, step 1. Step 2, what needs to be done. Step 3, do it. And report back. That doesn't work. In those kinds of cases, the people are confused. The devil's in there working, the flesh is in there working, and I've been a pastor and a leader for them so far. I need to be that now. I will lead you step by step in this process if you are willing. I mean it, but to be honest with you, it doesn't take much time to say I mean it, because in most cases they never come and take you up on it because they're not that interested in restitution and reconciliation. One case I never heard from the person again, the other a flurry of activity this morning, and we're not sure what's going to happen there. But I need to help you to follow through on what's right. You need to be able to do that, and that's what he's doing here. I've said, brethren, lest our boasting should be in vain, that you are ready. Verse 4, lest if some Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to mention you, should be ashamed of this confident boasting. So he's upping the ante a little bit, putting a little bit of fire under the pot. We need to complete this job, guys, because you inspired the Macedonians to give. They were impressed with your zeal. If they come down here with me and see that you've done nothing, that's going to be embarrassing for us because we boasted about you. Even more embarrassing for you because you haven't followed through. Therefore, verse 5, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren to go to you ahead of time and prepare your generous gift beforehand. Notice that word generous? A little subtle persuasion, right? How many were ever in sales? Did you ever get into sales? You had to use certain words to help to get an idea in somebody's mind about what is right. Put a little creative desire for that product. I want you to get that generous gift beforehand, which you had previously promised. Notice he's putting pressure on them. This needs to be a generous gift. You already promised it. That it may be ready as a matter of generosity, he's saying it again, and not as a grudging obligation. The word grudging in the Greek really means covetousness. When we have a grudging attitude about giving, it is the same thing as saying we're being covetous in the Greek. And that's exactly what's going on. When I have an attitude I don't want to have to give, it's another way of saying I'm covetous, I'm holding on. So I want this gift to be generous. You've already made a promise. And I want it to be given with a generous attitude, a loving, gracious attitude, not one of a covetous or grudging obligation. That sets us up now for the most important part of the passage, verses 6 through 15, talking about rewarding giving, which is our title for the day. It's amazing what giving in a godly way will do, because it blesses everybody. He's going to tell us that it blesses the giver, it blesses the receiver, and don't forget, it blesses God as well. There's nothing else I know about that can do such a good job as giving. And it can be giving of money, it can be giving of time, giving of talents and gifts, whatever it might be. But giving, it blesses everybody. Verse 6. But this I say, he's been talking about grudging obligation. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. The word bountifully means with blessings. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. As it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. Now may he who supplies seed for the sower and bread for food supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness. So, blessings come first of all to the giver when the giver gives. Paul quotes Jesus in the book of Acts as telling Paul, apparently directly, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And so it's talking about the blessings here. Go back to verse 6. We all understand this principle. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. It's the principle of sowing and reaping. We do it with grass seed. I'm getting a little more hope that spring is coming, and there'll be patches that are going to need some grass seed, right? And you've got to make a decision if you're going to sow by grass seed. Do you do a lot or a little? And you'd have to make a decision, how much do you want to get? And if you just go too sparingly with those seeds, you'll just get a couple of shoots coming up, but nothing like a rich, luxurious lawn. And the same with corn or wheat or any other principle there. The poor farmer that feels he can't afford to buy the seed to take care of 3 acres and only does 1 acre, is going to end up with only 1 acre of product when he's finished. So it's a principle. What you sow, you're going to reap. And again, we're talking money, we're talking time, we're talking resources, whatever we may have. Now, for the person that is understanding the giving principle with money, that's something that I learned early in my walk. I was challenged the very first time I went to a church service, a little Pentecostal church over on Route 32 in Delmar. And I had a brother come up to me and say, do you tithe? And I said, I just got saved, I have no idea what tithing is. And he said, tithing is giving God the first 10% of whatever you make or receive. And he said, I'll give you a principle, Brother Jerry, that you might want to remember. Everybody will tithe. Some will bring it to the church and be